A fight over control of the Mediterranean Sea. Libya and Turkey draw a boundary line in the water, but sitting in the middle is the Greek island of Crete. Athens says the move violates international law. So what's at stake, and could it lead to armed conflict? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Halla Mohieddine. Greece and Turkey are at odds over a host of issues, but the latest has pushed them closer to a military confrontation. Turkey has signed a deal with Libya that maps out a boundary in the east of the Mediterranean Sea. Greece has responded by expelling the Libyan ambassador and is bolstering its military in the area. There are fears the agreements will further complicate disputes over drilling for yet untapped oil and gas in waters around the ethnically divided island nation of Cyprus. Israel and Egypt are also involved in this increasingly bitter controversy. Well, the agreement between Turkey and Libya was signed at the end of last month. It basically draws a line in the eastern Mediterranean Sea between Turkey and Libya, cutting across a strip also claimed by Greece. Well, the maritime boundary separates what Turkey and Libya have agreed will be their exclusive economic zone. They say this gives them full rights to exploit natural resources, including oil and gas. Well, the deal comes as Turkish ships continue exploration and drilling activities in disputed waters around Cyprus. We'll bring in our guests shortly, but first, John Soropoulos reports from Athens.
The Greek foreign minister has summoned the Libyan ambassador to Athens and informed him this morning that he has 72 hours to leave the country. The Greek anger against Libya stems from not only the fact that Libya signed a treaty with Turkey which delineates an exclusive economic zone between those two countries that falls across what Greece sees as its own exclusive economic zone in the southeast Aegean and the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, but also because the Greek foreign minister had understood from his discussions with the Libyan ambassador and also with the Libyan foreign minister that this agreement would not be signed. So the Greek side expresses the feeling that there has been an element of deceit from the Libyan government, or at least that the Greek government was misled. The Greeks are also making contact with all of their key allies in the European Union and NATO, but also China and Russia and Israel, to gather as much international support as possible for the law of the sea, which, in the Greek reading of it, ascribes to islands a continental shelf and exclusive economic zone. If that reading of the law is correct, then Greece should have an exclusive economic zone that extends into the area that's now been divided between Libya and Turkey. Turkey has a different view. It does not believe that the international law of the sea necessarily gives islands an exclusive economic zone, and it has held to that position very consistently over the years. It also has condemned today the expulsion of the Libyan ambassador from Athens. The Greek side, we're given to understand by defense and foreign policy sources, has communicated to Turkey in no uncertain terms that should a Turkish exploration vessel enter the area that Greece deems as its own exclusive economic zone, then Greek naval forces will fire upon that vessel and sink it, with all of the repercussions that could follow from such an event.
Well, let's bring in today's guests. Joining us from London is Seckin, a political risk analyst focusing on Turkey at IHS Markit. In Istanbul, by Skype, Matthew Breiser, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Centre and Global Energy Centre, and a former US diplomat. And also joining us from London, Anas El-Gomati, General Director of the Sadek Institute, where he focuses on Libyan affairs. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. If I could start with you, Seckin. This is a controversial deal which has been proposed between Libya and Turkey. It's resulted in the expulsion of the Libyan ambassador from Greece. Why do you think this is so controversial? What's wrong with this deal?
Well, I won't say there's something necessarily wrong with it, but the controversy comes from the fact that this is Turkey's move against what has been an attempt to create a fait accompli on the southern side of its territories by a coalition of countries, including Greece, including Cyprus, and others. Of course, having to do with the dispute over the hydrocarbon resources around Cyprus. In Cyprus, the Cypriot government has been moving forward with plans to exploit those resources in a manner that would end up excluding Turkey. And with this deal with the Libyan government, what Turkey is trying to do is basically leapfrog the territory which would be the eventual route of a planned pipeline into Europe from Cyprus. So this is Turkey's response in what has been a long story thus far.
OK, let me take those points to Matthew Breiser. Matthew, nothing wrong with this deal. They're simply reacting to a fait accompli.
It very much depends who you are. Certainly, if you're Turkey, that is your view. You believe that because Greece decided to draw its maritime boundary in a way that you think is not in accordance with international law, whereby too much value is accorded to Crete, then you believe that Greece has taken over Libyan maritime territory, and then, as we just heard, has created a unified sort of collection of exclusive economic zones stretching from Cyprus all the way to Greece, where the pipeline could be built. If you're Greece, however, or Cyprus, or Egypt, you believe that Turkey, in fact, should be granting the island of Crete, the Greek island of Crete, greater force in determining the Greek maritime boundary. And in that case, it wouldn't be fair for this new boundary to be drawn. So where you stand is where you sit, as often happens in international law. And what ends up being right is simply what ends up being accepted as being right. But, you know, this is an actual agreement between two internationally recognized countries. And so while I'm not sure it will hold up in the long run, for now, Turkey and Libya have created a fait accompli.
So why do you think Greece is so unhappy then, if this is given that? Why are they so distressed to the point of expelling an ambassador?
Yeah. Well, number one, they want this pipeline, which, by the way, I think does not make economic sense. It's such a much longer, more expensive route than bringing a lot of that gas, especially from Israel to Turkey. But number two, there's a long history here of maritime disputes between Turkey and Greece. And the central component of that dispute is, again, how valuable are islands in determining the national coastline and the exclusive economic zone, which is not sovereign territory of a country, but it's where countries have exclusive rights. And this is such a testy issue between Turkey and Greece because many Greek islands abut right up practically against Turkey's coast. So if too much value is given to those islands in determining maritime boundaries, Turkey ends up risking getting bottled in and losing so many rights in the Mediterranean Sea that it otherwise would enjoy, and essentially cutting its maritime territory almost in half.
OK, let's turn now to Anas El-Gamati. Anas, we're hearing this is a dispute between Turkey and Greece. Why is Libya getting involved?
Well, Libya is certainly the Johnny-come-lately to this kind of dispute and to this crowd of or crowded kind of conflict for such a long time. It's been more than a couple of years. It's been decades, as your earlier guests have indicated. But we can't wrench this from its original context. In Libya's case, it's been involved in a conflict for the last 8 months, where there have been a number of different challenges to the sovereignty, to the even existentially to the Libyan government, to its base in Tripoli, from Khalifa Haftar, who is supported by many countries within the EU or many countries within the UN Security Council, who have not kind of lived up to the expectations here diplomatically. The Libyan government in Tripoli is the internationally recognized government by the EU, by the UN, but the UN and the EU have stood by idly as Khalifa Haftar has been bombing the capital, Tripoli, and has been incurring into the southern neighborhoods of Tripoli. So in that sense, Libya has kind of waded into a conflict, but it has waded in effectively because its problems are busting at the seams for the last 8 months. And the first of them is, why is the UN and why are the EU sitting by idly and not supporting a government that it brought into existence? And then number two, if that is going to be the case, I think the Libyan government is perhaps smiling at the fact that there is a moral outrage and diplomatic outrage and silence about the moral outrage and diplomatic outrage over what is happening in Libya. So I think in that respect, it's the most pertinent of problems. But I think Libya's role here is not only that it is going to contest and perhaps never in its lifetime even bring anything meaningful to a deal that may not transpire with Turkey, but the very fact that it contests it disrupts the kind of confidence that international oil companies need to be able to explore in that area, to be able to explore the valuable treasures underneath the water. And without that being solved, there is no way in hell that any international oil company was going to go in and try to explore for gas. So I think in that respect, it's kind of mission accomplished for the Turks and Libyans.
Would you say then, Anas, that this isn't a serious proposal? This is a cry for help from Libya to help. This isn't to do with oils and hydrocarbons. It's to do with we want help with this civil war that we're in, and nobody is coming to our aid.
Well, it's a theatre of conflict right now, and it's become almost like a pantomime. The very fact that the international community's silence with what is happening in Libya has really forced their hand, because this deal has so much more to do with the defence accords and the security arrangements that will be built on the back of this deal with Libya and between Libya and Turkey. In that respect, they need to be able to bring in weapons. They need to be able to bring in a partner that will help them. And Turkey kind of, stretched out its hand and gave Libya that lifeline that it was looking for. And I think that's the real basis as to why Libya has waded into this conflict. And I think that's the reason why there is so much moral outrage, but it's selective. And I think that's the problem that many will find today, particularly as Libya goes towards its 8th or 9th month and the international community begins to look at ways in which it wants to solve the crisis. It has to look at the international partners and actors that are involved in this. And Libya has now kind of played its hand as sitting back for the last 8-9 months, hoping that the UN will do something, hoping that the European Union will do something. And I think it's played a much more forceful hand in this respect, and it's shown a bit more teeth.
OK, Ege Seckin, if I could bring you in on this. In terms of this deal itself, what is it about? Is it about hydrocarbons or is it about geopolitical strength? We've heard there from Anas, Libya is quite keen to get the focus in on helping with this conflict that they are in. And if you look at the nuts and bolts of this deal, it seems to defy geography here, lines going diagonally, encompassing swathes of water that belong to Crete. So is Turkey serious about getting this deal done, or are there other issues at play?
Turkey is very serious, and I think what is being perceived by Turkey on its southern front is an attempt to box the country in. So this deal really has, I would argue, an existential value for the country. In fact, we have seen elements in the Turkish military, including the chief of the Turkish Navy currently, they have been advocating for such a deal for about 10 years. So this is not new. This is not a temporary tactical shift, but a natural extension of that intention, which has been the case for quite a while. And of course, there are other considerations domestically. We cannot disregard the fact that President Erdogan is rallying his support base with such moves. We have seen a great deal of support for the deal domestically. Some 85% of the population support Turkey's actions in the Mediterranean. And we also saw in the parliament the deal being passed by the opposition parties with record-breaking speed in one business day, in fact. So this is an indication of the domestic dimension also involved, which is important, but of course not the only consideration. We're seeing a marriage here between the geostrategic imperatives and Erdogan's personal domestic concerns, especially, I should add, in the context of the defeats he suffered earlier in 2019 in local elections. This is perhaps a way of overcoming that psychological defeat and really gaining the upper hand once again domestically.
But Ege, I mean, how feasible is it? I mean, Turkey's doing a deal with the Government of National Unity, which doesn't control the areas that it's mapping out in this deal. So realistically, are they expecting to get this through?
So that will depend on the direction which the civil war takes in Libya. And it is for this reason that Turkey has been investing heavily on the GNA side. They've been supporting the government militarily. And we think that this will probably intensify. Turkey will really need to go all in, so to speak, to make sure that the Tripoli government survives and establishes itself as a permanent entity. Because the alternative really for Turkey is getting completely boxed in, losing access to these natural resources on its doorstep in the Mediterranean. And ultimately, that would be a severe strategic defeat for the country and a big embarrassment for the president.
OK, Matthew Breiser, it sounds like Turkey are fairly serious. They're all in on this, according to Egi Seckin. Where does this leave Greece?
Well, it's precisely because Turkey is so adamant about this that Greece is apoplectic. And Greece is, I think, worried because the Greek Cypriots are worried because this agreement sets a precedent on Cyprus. We were talking about Cyprus at the beginning. So there's a natural gas field offshore Israel. It's called Leviathan. The most natural and most economically attractive way for that gas to get to the market, if it ever gets to any market, would be to Turkey. I mean, in large volumes. But the Greek Cypriots have said, well, our exclusive economic zone is where the pipeline has to cross, and we don't like this pipeline. So what that has done is then it makes it very difficult for any financiers, any banks, to support such a pipeline. And therefore that damages the investment, but it really makes Turkey feel as if something unfair is happening because of the history of the Cyprus question. The Cyprus question dates back, the dispute to the treaties and the Constitution of the Republic of Cyprus in 1960 that granted Turkish Cypriots certain rights, rights to participate in any decision of national importance, including hydrocarbons. And those rights were abrogated unilaterally by the Greek Cypriot side. We don't have to go into the whole history, but Turkey has felt it was trying to support an agreement to reunify the island, to overcome these disputes under UN auspices, and that the Greek Cypriots torpedoed that agreement, which was on the table 2 years ago under UN auspices. So if the Greek Cypriots were using the leverage of their exclusive economic zone at that time to block a project Turkey favored, I think Turkey's feeling, well, we're setting a precedent of our own now to block a pipeline Greece wants. And so we have a battle of pipelines, and this time Greece is on the side it doesn't want to be on.
Well, who do you think in this case, Matthew Breiser, has the upper hand here? Because, as you mentioned, that the issue with Cyprus has been going on for decades, and we're no closer to any resolution on it. Instead, we're seeing tensions ramp up on a separate front. Where does Greece go from here?
Well, Greece, where it goes is it pursues international solidarity. It has elicited statements of solidarity by other EU member states. The EU member states really stick together to support each other. And then Greece has strong friends in the United States, and the U.S. ambassador to Greece, a friend of mine, Jeff Pyatt, came out and warned that this agreement could risk further destabilization of Libya, if there could be such a thing, by the way. So Greece is going to look for international solidarity. Who has the upper hand, though, I think, is going to end up being who is boldest. Turkey has begun drilling offshore Cyprus, and that has engendered condemnation from the Greek Cypriots, from Greece, from the EU, threats of sanctions. And it may go ahead and do something similar having to do with this new agreement. And push will come to shove, and the question will be, well, what will the EU actually do if Turkey continues to assert this claim? I think we're going to be in ambiguity for a while. And as was just said, ultimately, whether this agreement holds is going to depend on the outcome of the Libyan civil war.
And on that subject, Anna, so which way do you see this going? Because there is now another dimension which has been added to it. Libya is in a key point. We're seeing international solidarity potentially bolstering around Greece. But Turkey has a strong hand to play here. How do you see this playing out?
Well, I'm not so sure that all of the international bodies are as strong and as robust as they once seem to have been. I think NATO's internal configuration right now is being threatened by Emmanuel Macron's statements in recent weeks about NATO being brain dead. Turkey is a critical member of NATO and that coalition, so is Greece, but I think Turkey's, at the moment perhaps has the upper hand, I would say. The European Union, no one needs to tell, or no one needs to speak too much about the EU's own crisis and its own miscalculations, perhaps even in Libya with Franco-Italian rivalry there also. So I think many of these bodies are facing extreme stresses that they have never faced before, and they are also existential. I mean, NATO is at a time where it's never been under so much stress. The EU is also at a time where it's never been under so much stress. And I think playing this card at this hand for Turkey has been critical. In terms of Libya's civil war, I think it's really, really difficult to tell. I mean, they're counting it, and I think the GNA is counting, its losses and its victories by inches. And that's why most of what is happening outside of Libya is to no concern, unless it is linked to giving it a lifeline, and that's where Turkey's role really comes in. And I think this deal, particularly on the under parts of the deal, the footnotes of this deal, which will really kind of be lucrative for the Libyan government, the GNA, are about trying to bring in more of a shopping list for how it defends the capital. And then if it so deems, in the next couple of weeks and couple of months, it wants to begin to stress the eastern part of Libya, Khalifa Haftar's stronghold. That's where we may see where, Turkish and Libyan kind of ideas kind of coalign and begin to really kind of ramp up. And that's where this shopping list becomes interesting. Drones, or even, much more than the small number that arrived in early April, but it could also be armoured personnel vehicles. But I think it's also technical assistance and military assistance on the Libyan front. And I think that's where today most of the problems are in Libya's southern, or Tripoli's southern neighbourhood, with Russian mercenaries that have arrived in recent weeks that have been capturing the headlines. The idea that a Berlin conference may be taking place or may not be taking place. It's such a complicated mess right now, and adding to this stress at least boldens the Libyan and the Turkish side in any future negotiations. But in the short run, the defence accords are going to be really, really critical for whether or not the GNA has legs.
OK, and if I could turn to you now, Seckin, we are running low on time, but it seems a high-stakes situation. The situation could turn either way, depending on how this is played. How far is Turkey prepared to go for this? Greece has said it's willing to send the Navy down to defend their interests. How far is Turkey likely to go? Will it come to blows? Do you think this could come to an eventual conflict?
The conflict is, at this current point in time, still far-fetched as an eventuality, but Turkey will show its military muscles. We are seeing already the gunboat diplomacy, which Turkey has been employing around Cyprus. This is likely to continue. And this is also a natural result of the fact that on the diplomatic front, Turkey has really run out of options. And here I'm referring to the fact that Turkey has made a lot of enemies in the neighborhood, whether we're talking about Egypt or, Greece and Cyprus were already the case. But Turkey has been unable to form a coalition in the region that would basically defend its interests. So really the only resort for Turkey right now is military posturing, and we will see that continue. And we will likely even see the extension of the gunboat diplomacy Turkey has been displaying to the vicinity of Crete, and that could really get into an escalatory pathway. And I think that would be the main risk to watch out for.
OK, and I'm afraid, gentlemen, we have run out of time, but certainly a critical situation and one we will continue to follow on Al Jazeera. But for now, Seckin, Matthew Breiser and Anas El-Gamati, thank you so much for taking part in today's discussion. Thank you too for watching at home. Remember, you can see this programme again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do head to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. The conversation continues on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. But for now, from me, Halla Mohieddine, and the whole team, it's bye for now.